So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Preccelerator workshop. Today we have a presentation of a different color. We've done these presentations on how to put pitch decks together and how to pitch, but today we're going to take it from a different point of view. And Matthew, an expert in this field, is going to talk to us about the neuroscience of pitches and closing deals, which I think is absolutely amazing. So I'm looking forward to the program. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you could all mute yourselves during the presentation, that would be appreciated. And then secondly, if you have questions, we're going to take questions at the end of the presentation. And if you put the questions into chat, I will moderate them in the order that they come in, and that will keep it, organized for all of us. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Matt Kalili to introduce himself and take it away, sir.
Thanks, Glenn. So everyone, excited to speak here today, and we're going to talk about a few controversial, fun things to kind of change up what the fundraising process looks like. And as Glenn said, I really want to highlight the perspective of neuroscience and the way investors think, and not just talk about pitching and business planning, but holistically how to set the stage for actually talking to an investor, pitching, planning, and raising money in 2024 in an environment that's changing very fast. So first lesson in the theme of neuroscience, I have a seemingly benign cover slide here. And everything I show here is really a lesson in when you go out to try to fundraise for your deals. So in a cover slide, it's very basic and simple. And the whole idea is when we are talking to investors, when we're communicating anything, if a person is trying to send a message and you have to anticipate what they're trying to say, the brain is going to be spreading that bandwidth and not concentrating on what you're saying. So it's very important to be clear what you're going to be talking about. And on a cover slide right away when you're pitching, let's try to be somewhat clear what your product is or what you're going to be talking about. So get people to focus. So when you're actually talking about the thing you're going to be talking about, they're paying attention. So in that vein, a very basic table of contents, right, can sound kind of lame, but it's very effective. So what we're going to talk about today is why I'm a credible authority to teach you guys how to pitch and fundraise deals, the truth behind how deals are really done in the real world, mechanics of a fundraising process, when you should start your fundraising, how to find your investor and tee yourself up for success, business planning, what makes a great pitch, some samples so you see what the product looks like in real world, the neuroscience behind the mechanism of what's going on when you pitch, something known as frames that we're going to get into later that's going to show the perspective and how to be able to take control of your pitch when you actually pitch, and all the fun legal stuff that Len loves to talk about when it comes to due diligence and negotiating a term sheet. So with that said, I'll tell you why I am a credible authority when it comes to helping people prepare their investor presentations and business plans. And I'm saying this to actually teach a lesson. So something in the perspective of neuroscience is very interesting. The way the brain works is it averages the accomplishments and track records that you communicate. I have a million things I could say about my experience, and I've been around the block. But when I prepare presentations in something like this, I pick the things that are most relevant and of the highest value. If I talked about something less relevant today, it would bring down my average in credibility and moral authority. So for me personally, I'll just share with you that I was involved in a venture that went from 0 to 100 million. We built a shopping cart in the 90s, and we created an internet retail company that was on the map as a top 500 e-commerce company. So I've been involved in ventures. I don't just teach things and create fancy decks. I've actually been there from the ground up. I've started my own SaaS company. I've spoken to hundreds of angel investors. I went through the whole process. I've successfully raised seed funding. And I built an agency that has helped over 5,000 founders. And collectively, with my work, they've raised $1 billion according to our statistics. And I've been doing this for 10 years. Now, remember, there's so many other things I could talk about. I chose three that are the top, that are the most relevant and the highest value. Don't bring down your average. And when you're pitching, set the framework right so that people are paying attention and listening to you. So something simple as this is going to command a lot of authority when you pitch. So I'd like to talk about exactly what really happens in the real world, and it's behind the scenes when it comes to fundraising and a successful pitch. So the truth is, a lot is decided. I'd say over 50% of the deal is decided subconsciously the second before you pitch. And the reason is how you get set up to the deal, your social dynamics, your credibility, the just all the nuances that happened before have already subconsciously set the framework and have already made the decision kind of in the investor's head. Investors are very sophisticated, but even the most sophisticated ones, they make decisions emotionally and they justify things rational. They've done a study where they've asked people to take brain scans and asked to make a very simple decision if they want to take a left door or right door. And they had a very simple message behind it. And they found that investors have made a decision 7 seconds before they thought they did, right? So there is a powerful force going on here that is neuroscientific that I'd like to empower everyone with. And I'd like to help you guys set the stage so when you do go and fundraise, you can empower yourself and take control. Now, what I do here is we create investor decks, we create business plans, and our work is important, but alone, it is absolutely meaningless if you don't look at things holistically. And I'd like to just encourage all the entrepreneurs we have in this room. A lot of this stuff sounds difficult, and it absolutely is, but it is doable. Everyone can learn how to pitch. It takes practice. It takes being authentic, and it takes getting out there. But I wasn't a great pitcher when I started. I've had millions of clients that had no business pitching to start. But at the end of the whole process and with practice and with sweat and blood and tears, they became amazing. So anyone can learn how to do this. So just some basic mechanics on what a usual fundraising process looks like. And mind you, there are no rules in entrepreneurship. Someone can give you a deal, you can pitch on a napkin, there could be a handshake, a deal can be done, right? So this isn't a rule, this is just a guideline on typically how a deal is set. So the first thing I usually encourage our client after they prepared their plan and they've got their deck and they're ready to fundraise, you got to research your investors and find exactly who the right type of investors are. You're going to be networking. You want to get teed up to a meeting very strategically. You're going to have your pitch. If you've done your job, there's a due diligence process where make sure you didn't bullshit or you didn't lie, and they're going to catch you in this stage if they do. And if you're awesome and you've done your job well, people are going to hand you a term sheet. And in that term sheet, you're going to negotiate and you're going to close and get funded. So with this in mind, I'd like to talk about kind of how all this gets set up in the real world. So a common question I get, Len, and I've seen you talk about this a lot, is when to raise capital. So the truth is, if you want to raise capital tomorrow, you need to start yesterday. What I mean by this is, as soon as you announce your venture to the investment community, to the world, as soon as it becomes a thing, you need to be getting momentum fast. Companies that actually go and fundraise, they have a window of opportunity to show the world that they're getting traction and momentum. And if you're not doing so, your chances of fundraising decline dramatically. So at the beginning, if you're going out to raise money, right? A lot of times you're going to get meetings. It's generally not the first investor. Generally, the first meeting you have, your investor is not going to say yes. You're going to have to keep investors updated. You're going to have to go out there and knock on a lot of doors. But if you are getting customers, you're accomplishing milestones, you're growing, things are going well, right? And you're doing things quickly, you're going to have a lot of excitement. But after a certain timeline, and generally the rule of thumb is if it's been 18 months and you haven't been able to be successful in fundraising and you've announced this to the community, your deal becomes stale. Investors are going to get triggered with light or flight. They're going to be threatened by what your business is and scared to invest in you. So I'd like to really share with everyone, it takes time to fundraise. Momentum is absolutely key. And really, that's the most important lesson I want to give you, right? When you're going from a position of strength, you're getting traction, you're getting momentum. You're not waiting for one investor to say yes. You're lining up lots of deals, and know that a deal needs to be made done sooner than later. So when to fundraise, it's a ambiguous question. Like things can happen very quickly, but it's trending longer. And 3 to 18 months is generally the sweet spot when most deals happen. And if it takes longer than that, your chances and probability, the data shows that's going to decline rapidly. So get moving if you're trying to fundraise. Don't stay static. You got to make it happen quick, sooner than later. So I'd like to talk about how to do a little bit of investor research. So the key to success in any fundraise is to know thy investor more than they know you. And thank God in this era, we have so many amazing tools. But the most important thing is to be real, right? Understand exactly what stage you're in, what type of check size you really need, and what's right for your stage of the company. And find investors that have invested in relevant businesses to you, right? So I got to tell you, investors do not like to invest things they don't know about, right? You want to work with people who are familiar with your industry that can understand what you're trying to do. So a lot of tools out there. I'm a big fan of this software called Founder Suite. If you got a budget, there's something known as PitchBook, but there's incredible tools out there. And one of the things is LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn can sometimes be your best friend in being able to help you find what they invest in, because they'll tell you themselves. So first thing is take the time, build a long list of investors that are super relevant for your stage. And what I like to tell my clients is, for the first 10 that you want to outreach, keep it as target practice. And when you've built up your confidence, get your next 11 to like 50 investors on your list to be more of the kind of real investors that you want to target after you refined yourself. So how to set up your meeting. This is so critical, right? When you want to talk to an investor, how you get set up to this meeting is a big part of the battle. If it comes from a warm, high quality source, you end up becoming the prize. You end up taking control. You're coming from a position of strength. If you're going in cold, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do, just know you're facing an uphill battle. I've looked into the data, and warm referrals are 13 times likely to get funded on a fundraise compared to someone going in cold. So what are some ways that you can build a warm intro to an investor? Number one is you got to leverage your network, right? You want to make friends with people that are founders who have exited. You want to get some mentors. You want to get some advisors. You want to really document who you know. And it's not necessarily the people you know may be your investors. It's who they can introduce you to. There's a saying that if you want money, ask for advice. When you want advice, ask for money. And where I'm going with that is you want to be able to get genuine feedback from people and build a network of people who are looking out for you. So your network is the easiest way to get access to people with money, and you want to go for very high quality sources. Elon Musk making a referral to a venture fund is going to obviously do a lot more damage for you than, someone who's not really well known. Next thing is common sense. Let's do some networking and go to industry events, right? That aren't necessarily like founder friendly networking events. I went to something super random. I am a prominent speaker a lot of times at the EB5 investors community, and it's a very antiquated community. And I've heard similar stories to this all the time. When you go to industry conferences, they are investors walking the floor all the time. I was talking to someone who took a great interest in what I was doing, and I found out that this guy just raised $100 million for his AI fund, and he was scouting deals right now in this industry that were relevant to modernizing some antiquated industry. So I want to say, put yourself out there, go to your industry events that are relevant to you, be nice to everyone, be authentic. You never know who's going to be there. Now, I'd like to talk about another source, and this might be a little bit more realistic. LinkedIn is an awesome tool, like I said, and investors are telling you what they're investing in, and they're right there and they're accessible. But you don't want to just kind of go in there cold, right? Don't just go in and pitch like everyone under the sun. Some people are like the fan, hey, this is a numbers game. I am not a numbers game guy. I am a highly personalized, highly cultivated, strategic outreach guy. So what I do with LinkedIn is if I found my ideal investor and I don't know how to get set up with someone that I know, and I'm not just, I don't really have the in, engage with that person first. Follow them on LinkedIn and on Twitter. Comment on their post. Say something interesting. Turn that cold lead into something warm. They're going to be posting where they're at. Try to show up to an event. Be a face that they recognize. And what you can do is turn a cold lead into something warm. So this stage is arguably one of the harder stages that you need to accomplish, but it is absolutely critical. If you get a warm introduction, you're setting the stage for everything. So I want to get into some of the details now on how to actually plan and how to deliver the pitch and some of the meat and potatoes on the product. And a lot of you maybe heard some of these things here. So I'm just going to give some high level overviews. And obviously there's so much more that comes to planning and pitch deck. So if people are interested to understand what it takes for the planning process, I encourage you to set up a free consultation with me. I've got a link tree at the end, and I'm taking free consults, so Len will distribute that later. But let me give you just kind of the key points into planning and being able to get the information for your plan and your pitch. So common thing that founders do that's super lame is they want to size the market. They found the big industry size, and they say, if I get 1%, it's this big market. Lame. Okay, I've got a great product. Customers will love it. Doesn't tell me anything, and I don't believe you. Okay, I'm just going to sell directly to customers. So generic. Okay, the proper way to build market, to do market sizing, and the proper way to actually come up with a genuine marketing plan is, number one, instead of just taking a market share, talk about how you can actually build off an existing customer base. Be specific. Talk about partnerships that you've got, genuine communities that you can actually cultivate, that you've got access to, and get real data on customer acquisition costs when you're building your marketing, and actually use that data to build a real market size on things that you can actually access. So Len, I know you've had lots of workshop about TAM, SAM. I don't want to dig so much into this, but the only thing I want to say here is, hey, there's two ways of doing it. And it's kind of like economic data. It can be so manipulated what these market sizing is. And the whole point of market sizing is to show that, hey, this venture meets the smell test and you're using plausible assumptions. But there's something known as the top-down approach where you build an industry size and you capture a percentage and boom, it's a big market. I mean, sometimes you got to do it, But what I use this top-down approach for is, hey, does it meet my checks and balance for what really matters? And what really matters is what we call a bottom-up approach. And again, I'm not going to dwell too much into it. I'm going to show you a sample. But a bottom-up approach is, right, what do you really have the capacity to actually sell? What's in your pipeline? Like, how did you actually come up with these assumptions literally from the bottom up? And I'll show you what that looks like. And you know what? People have so many different ways of slicing and dicing it, but it's really the mindset and methodology that matters. And people don't really care about all the quantum engineering that you can do to calculate this stuff. They care about the smell test. So use this tool for what it is and don't get stuck up on this. Now, a few things that we do want to do in your planning, use good sources. Don't be cheap. There's like amazing market reports out there. I love Ibis World. I love Forrester. I love Mintel. I love Nielsen. When you're planning, you're going to have to spend money and you're going to have to identify positive trends. And what I want you to do is obviously we want to show that there's a big market for something if this is a venture. Some of you don't have big ventures, and that's okay. You've got lifestyle businesses and you want to be real with yourself, right? But we want to see exactly who is a accessible market that you can capture. We want clean sources that you can show. Sometimes you're going to have to get creative. I've worked with a lot of founders that have very fragmented data, and we have to really kind of piecemeal different sources to see what that market looks like. But we just want to make sure it's big and growing, right? So, and that's the point of business planning. So something I really like to talk about with my clients, because competitive analysis is a really big part of your business plan. And I've just seen a lot of lame things. And the way I really like to frame things with my investor network, or like coach my clients in, is how to really position your company in a blue ocean space to just see and understand how you fit into the landscape. Now, the point of a plan and pitch is not to give all the information in the world. It's to give useful information to have follow-on conversations. So a simple tool I like to use is, can you define your business in two diopposing axes, right? And label them something simple as, hey, a low price product, a high price product, high quality company, low quality. And can you put yourself in a plane that is favorable, that is less crowded, that is unique? If you've done that, you really set the stage of being able to deliver a meaningful competitive analysis, and then you can write a lot more useful material around that. So this is just kind of one of my useful tricks on the trade. And obviously there's so many things we could talk about on this, but that's not the point of today's presentation. Anyone's curious about real other tactical things in business planning, set up a consultation, we can talk about it. Now, what makes a good pitch? I talked about your story, being able to connect emotionally to people. Remember that data obviously matters, but people remember emotions so much more. So you're really trying to build a connection when it comes to your pitch. Your pitch is not a business plan, right? I don't want you to give too much information to an investor. When you're dating someone, do you go and tell your whole life story on a first date? Absolutely not. Your whole point of a first date, if you really like a person, is to get on a second date and learn about each other gradually. It's the same thing with an investor. So practical tips, use big fonts, 25, 30 font size, to force yourself not to put too much information on a slide. Use dramatic headers. A lot of people, what they do is they have a problem, solution, they have a very template. Templates do not work in 2024. Len, as an investor, if you see a template and you see some very generic stuff, what does your brain tell you as an investor? Are you running away, or are you or do you actually take it seriously?
It just shows a lack of effort and a lack of originality. So while templates are good to get started, you really have to personalize these things and order them in a way that makes sense, that accentuates your story.
What do you mean by template?
Absolutely. So a template is a pre-made business plan that you just edit, or pre-made slides. And a lot of these slides, they'll literally say problem, and then you put a bunch of points on problem. Instead of doing that, I describe the problem. I make it dramatic. I I I really value and respect the real estate on a slide, and I use that space very carefully. And I respect how the human brain works, because they don't want to process too much information, and I'd be able to communicate it with as little words as possible. And what we're doing with all this is we're activating something known as the croc brain that I'm going to get into. So I'm going to give some actual qualitative information on this, right? So it's not just some generic points. So I've taken some third-party sources that have actually surveyed what VCs and successful startups actually include on their pitch deck, right? And the point of this chart here, everyone, is to show that there's a little bit of flexibility, right? And there is room for a little bit of originality. You don't want to stand out too much, but I've heard from so many of my clients, you must have X, Y, Z on your deck. But the truth is, there's only a couple of things that I would say are standard across everything. And the real rule of thumb is you have to be cognizant of what stage your business is in. And if you're early stage, pre-revenue, you got to really focus on the market opportunity, the problem, right? The story. If you're later stage, you really need to talk about, you can actually afford to talk about scaling in different sections, and actually have more information, more slides. So you have to have some judgment on what's relevant to you. And what is the commonality with a lot of things are problem, solution, business model, competition, your team, and what you're fundraising. And you're going to hear from so many different sources, you got to have X on your slide, or it's not a real slide. And I really just kind of roll my eyes. Just find out what makes you awesome, right? And if you don't have certain things in that really make you stand out, that make you look better, I don't care if you include it or not. If you want to take something unconventional, you can take a little bit of risk and add something creative to it, right? But keep it short. I don't like long slides, right? Most people here, 11 to 15 slides seems to be the range. Less slides are fine too. And definitely include the commonalities, and really think about what helps you, what advances your cause. Because if you're putting in information that doesn't make you sound great, that doesn't improve your story, and you're kind of filling your deck, you're going to de-optimize your chances of success. So I'll give you a couple of examples, and I'm going to talk a little about the neuroscience, right? Instead of saying problem, right, I'm giving a header. Drowning in waste in a global crisis. I am keeping it simple. Your deck isn't a disco ball, right? It needs to have a minimum number of colors, easy to read, high text. I've got a short narrative on the left. People like to read from left to right. I have metrics, 35%, 40, 60. It crescendos. It's nice. People took some effort to make some icons. It's simple, right? It's all about how you communicate this information. The information needs to be good, but respect the brain and what it's able to process, and respect how it functions when you're actually creating these decks. So I talked about the TAM Samsung, and I want to give an example of it on what it looks like, in real life. So again, I've got a slide here, brewing for success, stirring up a $5 million opportunity, right? I don't use a templated section on, hey, market opportunity, market sizing. I use that real estate strategically, okay? In this case, $54 billion is the industry size of coffee shops in the US. Easy to understand, okay? In my local market, $50 million in transactions. And I use this based on assumptions on average consumption rates, population size. Credible, useful assumptions that meet the smell test. Could you have engineered this a different way? Sure. but $50 million, seems credible, okay? And then the max capacity of the store that I am putting out there that I could actually capture, right? $5 million. That's my serviceable obtainable market, right? Just a very simple slide. It gives me the information. It shows me the data, right? And it helps me meet the smell test, and it captures all the information that you need to help you communicate your story and focus on what matters.
Matt, on the obtainable market, is there a time frame of that obtainable market that you make an assumption on? Is that a 3-year time frame, a 5-year time frame, lifetime time frame? How do you position that?
Let's stop thinking about an investor. Okay. The truth is, it doesn't matter. Think about it a 1 year, 3 year, be consistent. I don't really care. Okay. The whole point is, it's like economic data. Manipulate it to make you look good, but don't lie and be consistent, right? You want to do it 1 year, great. Maybe you need to engineer it a little bit more in your favor, fine. Okay. This information is important, Len, right? But it's got to be targeted towards maybe the investor and what his timeline horizon is, whatever is relevant to your stage of the business, what's going on in the industry. Like, there are rules, they're general guides, but you got to just have wisdom and judgment, right? In configuring these numbers, right? It sounds easy, and I know there's a lot behind it. And I know you have a lot of views on this, right? I am not as, I'm a little bit more flexible than I guess the average person when it comes to this.
I was just looking for your assumption.
Fair enough. So let's talk about now the croc brain, right? And like exactly meaningful ways to figure out how to pitch. So I want to give a little context, right? So the croc brain, which is known as like the basic primal brain, it's basically hardwired to survive, right? Every information it gathers, it needs to be able to know how to transmit information to optimize its chances to survive. And that's really how it works. We have so many things going on in the world. It's got to capture information and decide what it wants to pay attention to and what it wants to ignore. So there are 3 sides of the brain, right? There's that croc brain that is extremely raw. There's that midbrain. And if you do well and you want to actually transmit information and actually pay attention, it'll add some context to what's going on, and it'll send it up to the highest part of the brain. And that highest part of the brain doesn't necessarily make the real decision, like I've said earlier on. It tries to problem solve, and it tries to analyze complex issues, and it gets into the logic part of decision making, which isn't where decisions are made. So how the croc brain works is it gatekeeps information in 3 ways. Number 1, you say something and the brain will dismiss the information as not useful. It is not an evolutionarily benefit to me to be able to take this information on. It identifies it as a threat. It'll stimulate fight or flight, right? This information is threatening. I'm scared. I'm not paying attention to this. And then it has a benefit, and it approves the message, and it'll send it upstream to those channels. So contextually, how do we create pitches to activate the croc brain and get it to pay attention? So the first thing is simplicity and relevance, right? Is one of many lessons here. So the brain has this thing known as cognitive load that we're going to talk about, and it has a capacity, right? And it doesn't want to invest resources on anything too complicated, right? You got to get its attention. And if it takes a lot of resources to process, it's going to want to naturally allocate its resources elsewhere. So when you hear people talk about keep things simple, there's a reason for it. It's just how we're hardwired as humans, and you have to respect that. And then the other thing is keep it relevant. If you can't frame something for something they can understand, it's automatically not, it's going to also code it as too complicated as well. So simple means not too many words. It means understand, and relevance means understandable. People need to be able to get it quick. Now that's not enough, right? Obviously, if things are simple, relevant, and boring, it's not going to get to the higher parts of the brain. So what we do is we like to add novelty, and we need to bound something within an area of familiarity that they can actually resonate with, right? So if someone's heard the same idea before, it's going to dismiss the information as not useful. But if it's so innovative and it's so out there, right, people are actually going to be threatened by that idea as well. So there's a careful balance between, hey, driving something new that they haven't heard before. There's a benefit to what I do, but it's also familiar. So a lot of common pitches will say, this is the Airbnb of the, I don't know, airline industry, right? So Airbnb of airplanes. Wow, you get it quick. You compounded two different industries to make it relatable. You haven't said too much. And hey, I could see a benefit into something like that. So common tool is when you're pitching to be able to keep things in that framework. And then one of the other techniques that I really talk about a lot, if you've done your job, you set up the meeting properly, and you come from a position of high status, and you can command a high level in your social dynamics, the brain is positioned to listen to people of moral authorities, to leaders, right? And you can actually claim that, right? And there's going to be some techniques I'm going to give you, but setting up a warm investor meeting is going to help people get to listen to you more as well. So we want to understand that humans are hierarchical species, and we like to pay attention to people that are leaders. So I want you to work on setting yourself up as one. And I'm going to give you a little bit of some practical tools on this on the next slide. Okay. So something that I'm pretty passionate about, and these are techniques that have been taught by an individual named as Oren Klaff, and he writes a book called Pitch Anything. And if anyone's really interested in learning how to pitch, it's a phenomenal book. But he teaches something known as frames. Frames is really the perspective on how one is perceived. And what you want to do when you want to pitch, you need to learn how to take control. So a successful pitch, in order to get someone to listen to you, has to be done on your time, has to be done on your agenda, and you need to command that pitch. You need to take full ownership of this pitch. And it's very hard. You're going to be dealing with lots of investors out there that have different personalities, and you have to understand you want something from them. They don't necessarily always want something from you, but they're giving you a chance. And that's automatically a position of a lower status. So I want to give people some practical tools on how this happens. And I'm going to talk about two today. And if anyone wants to learn more, talk to me. I can give you a little bit more insights into this. But something known as a power frame, okay? A lot of times you're positioning to these type A individual investors. And these type A's, they have egos, right? And some of these type A folks, right, they'll do very subtle things to actually really take all the power and control over an investor pitch. So an example that's actually given in this book, that's actually happened to me, right? You're pitching to somebody and that investor is doodling, right? Isn't paying attention, is writing something and not really paying attention to you. It could be a doodle, it could be something else, but the idea is they're not listening to you. It's obvious, they let you know. And this is a super important meeting to you. And this person is on your incredibly important investor meeting, just not paying attention to you, obviously, right? So what I teach a lot of my clients is if this person isn't listening to you, you most likely don't have this deal done, and you need to be able to take risk. So I encourage people to be bold and be defiant, right? But be tactful. So you can't take things personally when you're fundraising. This is going to happen to you, right? You want to be able to reclaim control in a very tactful and fun way. So what I've done is when someone is doodled, I actually will go up to the investor. I will stop my presentation. I will take their doodle from their hands and be like, oh my God, this is beautiful. I completely understand why you were spending time doing this because you're obviously very talented. Let's talk, let's forget like this pitch. How much are you willing to sell on your doodle? But not like a jerk, right? Not like someone that's taking things personally. You're having fun. You're being playful. And then be like, listen, I totally get it. If you don't mind, I'm going to get back to my pitch here. And then you re-engage people in the story. Very subtle. But what you've done is you've taken control. You're not threatened by what that person has done. You got people to pay attention, and you've taken a strategic risks. Something that happens all the time, right? Is this notion of a time frame as well that I want to get into. It is so common to go and get an investor meeting and go through what I call a dehumanizing process. In this dehumanizing process, maybe you're going into a security arena where the front desk has to give you a badge. You're waiting in a conference room. You're going through a bunch of rituals. You're waiting for the investor to come, right? And then an investor is going to come into a room and say like, hey, I only got 15 minutes. So if you don't mind, let's kind of keep things on that timeline. Look, the investor is completely allowed to say what they want to say. Now, obviously, we always need to be respectful, but you have to also understand what's going on neuroscientifically, right? You're being forced into this frame of super low status. You've been dehumanized getting into this conference room, right? So you need to be able to reclaim power tactfully. And what I like to tell my clients is, hey, you want to control the pace. It has to be your agenda. It has to be your pitch. So what you'll tell the investor is, oh, look, I don't even have 15 minutes. I actually have 10. If it's all right with you, I have 10 minutes for this pitch. And what you want to do as well is don't be so grateful. Don't act so needy. Don't try to be overly polite, because that's going to set the hierarchical status really quickly. What you want to do is obviously be professional, right? But don't feel like you need to people please people as you're coming into this pitch. What you want to do is you want to be the prize, and you want to say there's only one of me and money is a commodity, and really take that control and conviction. So Len, I'm sure you have a lot of different views, and this is a little controversial. What I'm trying to show people here is not to be like a jerk or be disrespectful, but what I am trying to do is to teach people to have a lot of conviction, right? I want you to realize that, hey, you are the prize. Fundraising is hard, but this investor out there, right? You want to have the mindset that they want you, and you want to be able to counteract these kind of power struggles that happen extremely subtly. Because if you do this properly and you practice your pitch and you can engage people in a story, this is more important than the content. I swear to God, guys, like so many people get deals done with substandard content, and this is how they do it. The content's important, right? There's going to come a time where all this stuff matters, but learn these techniques and it's going to level up your pitch game.
At the other side of that is people can sometimes go in the other extreme and come across as arrogant or elite. And so I think you have to be careful of that too, because that will also turn off somebody.
100%. And I always tell my clients, if you're taking power, you do have to give it back, right? And you are building a relationship. Relationships need to be give and take. And things need to be used in good judgment. But you need to also be interesting. You also need to be bold. You also need to be confident, right? So the definition of humility, Len, is someone that's really in tune with the reality of their position, right? A humble person who knows it are great, can have a lot of conviction in that and not be this arrogant person. So there is a way of being humble, yet being someone with full of conviction, right? So I totally agree with you. A lot of these things need to be done tastefully and in good judgment, but they should be learned, and they're very powerful tools. So I'm gonna wrap up this presentation, but Len, as you know, like in a due diligence process, you can be very charismatic, but if you bullshit, you will get crushed in 2024. So what I always like to tell my clients is front load all the information that you're going to share with an investor. Don't scramble at the end. If you delivered a great pitch, right? People want to make a decision, but don't give them an excuse to say no. Have your business plan, have your financial model, have your accounting documents, have your legal documents, have them all created upfront in a data room or a Dropbox, because people are going to look into this stuff eventually, and make sure in your pitch, whatever material you sent out to them, there are no red lines. Okay. I am telling you right now, you're allowed to exaggerate. You are not allowed to bullshit, and you are definitely not allowed to lie. So be honest. If there is a red flag that are out there that someone's going to pick up, be transparent about it. Talk about it early, right? Don't let them find that on their own, right? So very simple lesson, very easy. If you got to this process, they want to do the deal. Just don't screw it up at this point. Anticipate it and nip it in the bud. And this is why you guys, in this point, right? This is where you want to hire someone great like Len to help you, right? There is a opportunity to negotiate a term sheet. So what happens if you went through a due diligence and you get that term sheet, right? I'll just tell you where I had a few clients really screw this up and how to actually negotiate things properly. So unfortunately, in the investor community, people look at who represents you in a legal negotiation very carefully. And what I mean by that is if you get like a tier 3 law firm and you get someone or you try to negotiate something on your own and you don't know the conventions of deal making and you don't know the investor lingo, and you start negotiating asinine points that just don't make sense, and you don't know what deal points you need to negotiate with, you look like an amateur, you'll embarrass yourself, and you might leave money on the table. Now, at this point, right, this deal is so close to being done. If you get a term sheet, and my biggest lesson here is either know what the hell you're doing or hire someone legitimate. I've had a situation where people have crushed it. They got a term sheet. They hired someone that had no business negotiating for them. And the VCs told the client that, look, either you change who represents you in this negotiation or I'm not funding this. So not a whole lot of, there isn't like a whole much more else I want to say about this. I'm sure Len can talk hours upon it, but that is the end of a deal-making process. And if anyone is interested, I'm offering the community here a couple of things. If you click on my link tree, and Len, if you'd be maybe kind enough after this to disseminate this, happy to review anyone's pitch deck, anyone's business plan for free. I'm a super nice guy. I love helping entrepreneurs. I'd be glad as well if anyone needs help with pitch decks and business plan to be there for them. Got a couple of fun freebies there to talk about exactly different funding sources around there. And stay on my link tree, stay engaged, follow us, and that's my presentation for today. So appreciate everyone having me, and I'm sure maybe there's going to be some questions, and Len, and be happy to talk with you.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Matthew. Great presentation, great information. And just before everybody runs, we are going to take a couple of questions here. And I also want to remind people that our next workshop in 2 weeks on the 23rd of this month is on term sheets 101. So it's a great segue from this program to the next. And I would encourage everybody here to register for that program. Here's a couple of questions. So Max asked, how can you strike a balance between demonstrating confidence and conviction and showing that you're open to feedback and guidance, aka being coachable?
Sure. Look, these are things that come with experience. So what I'll share with everyone, right? The founders that I've seen being really successful is that conviction is so important. You have to really believe in yourself, right? But conviction shouldn't blind you. So you have to learn, you just have to be humble, but also humility is not mutually exclusive from being very confident, right? So I would tell everyone, build your confidence, believe in yourself first. No one's going to want to invest in you if you don't have a lot of conviction in what you want to do. And all I could say is like that conviction should embrace feedback, right? And in this world, there are people that will give you bullshit feedback, and that's okay. You want to be able to like learn from patterns, right? Like if people are saying the same thing over and over again, have the humility to think that you're probably wrong. If someone is an absolute expert and an authority, listen to them, right? If they're telling you something, they know a lot. You know, you might be able to learn from it, right? Also, there are going to be a lot of morons out there telling you bullshit things, right? You have to have the experience and judgment when not to listen, right? And respect yourself as well. So unfortunately, there's no real answer to these things, right? Like AI isn't going to be able to take over the world one day and just tell you the right answer to these things. There is a world of humans that go through experience, that talk to lots of people and recognize, right, what's authentic and what's real. So the only thing I can tell you is be very authentic about yourself and your needs, right? And don't have too many mentors. Have one mentor to guide you that you really respect and trust, right? That's something that's always helped me, right? So have like, if you ask so many opinions, you're going to get more confused, right? But you have to choose a perspective in life. You have to choose a paradigm. You have to be faithful to what you know, and you have to be able to trust your judgment and just be willing to improve. And it'll all come together.
And I'll add to that, be an active listener. That's a great way to show humility, where people know that you're engaged in actually listening to them, as opposed to just letting it go over your head. I think that's really important. And then be value aligned with your mentors. Make sure that your values are aligned. You may not agree on content or specifics, but if you can agree on values, you'll get a lot more out of that relationship and a lot more relevant ideas of how to move forward. So next question is, how much of this advice is applicable to pre-seed rounds under 500,000, particularly when founders are dealing with angel investors or high net worth individuals who may not be sophisticated investors?
Extremely relevant. I would tell you that, right, the principles are exactly the same. I think if anything, it's probably more pertinent than not, right? So you may not have as much due diligence to share with them, but later stage, earlier stage, you still need to be able to connect to people emotionally. This product needs to resonate with them, right? Yes, maybe it'd be harder to educate investors and people. And I might tell you that I would shy away from investors that maybe don't know as much about your industry. You want your investors to take on a risk with something that they know and they're comfortable with. And when you do your investor communications and relationship, and ideally you want your investor to help you, it makes things easier. We may not all have that luxury, and that is okay. There are no rules. Be real with your needs. If it's really hard to fundraise and you've got access to an investor that isn't sophisticated, it is what it is, right? A lot of people speak negatively about crowdfunding. You know, last year, Len, was a tough year, right, for fundraising. You know, if you got through it and you fundraised, sometimes you got to go through alternative means. And you know, just to talk about fundraising, like the world is changing, right? And when I say that is what wasn't maybe acceptable before, people have come up with great solutions. Like I like crowdfunding campaigns that, for instance, will roll up everyone into an LLC and keep a clean cap table. So there are ways of doing things and raising money alternatively and less sophisticated people, but you got to do it properly, and you got to get good legal representation to guide you, right? Because these moves you make do matter.
Absolutely. Thank you. Anybody else have any other questions? A lot of accolades in the comments section, Matt. You have your fan club here, which is great. But also I'm noticing people who are here and has probably seen this presentation for the first time are very complimentary. So great job.
Thanks, Lon. Anything else I can help with? Happy to take on more questions. If not, you know, feel free to schedule time with me. Happy to see if we can help you out.
So